last slide just says emerging issues. This is also on, oh wait, go back, I'm sorry, I'll just go through and go back. Okay, just stop at this one, I'll just talk about this one a little bit, and then I'll go to the emerging issues. So. Okay, so I was just going to also, like I said, you guys are all very well briefed on what you need to do to intervene in the case, so I didn't want to repeat any of that. One thing I do want to talk about a little bit is just ways to make what you're submitting more powerful. Definitely putting something in over nothing is very important. Even 700 form letters is better than 0 letters, but 700 letters that are all different from each other, FERC has to go through all of them, and it's also more powerful. And in fact, I've even seen now in some of the FERC orders, FERC distinguishes between form letters and non-form letters. So you can tell that they're trying to dispense with the weight of letters that are just form letters. So what I say here is to tell your own story and just go on to the next one. So the first I say in your own words. What I mean by that is, in this case, there are definitely issues related to air emissions. And I know that some of you may have specialized knowledge of air emissions, or may have done some research on it. And putting that information into your pleadings, that's important. But with something like air emissions, that's also something that's regulated by the state and by EPA. And that's something where you really want to bring those agencies in. It's because that's their argument. It has more weight coming from them because they're the regulators of it. If you can get somebody from the environmental agency, from EPA or from Maryland State Department of Environmental Protection to say these emissions are going to be harmful, this is going to put us in non-compliance, that's going to carry the most weight with FERC rather than you all saying it. And the worst situation is to have those agencies come out and say, oh, there's nothing wrong, there's no emissions problem, and then to have the landowners and the property owners and the people in the community saying it. So.
Yeah, I contacted the MDE, Maryland Department of the Environment. Actually, there is a permit pending right now from DTI about the construction emissions. So there is something going on, but they told me it's very early. But I could sign up for a special or interested party, and I would get information for that. I don't know if that's already on the website. Perhaps we should put that up, that you can sign or email or phone this person that you're interested in that, and then you get all the information that's related to that permit in the process of the MDE. And that would also be possible to intervene or at least to give your comments during that permit process. So, and then I guess after the construction permit, they will try to get the operational permit as well. That's another issue where we can perhaps intervene at the state level. And then if they say, oh no, or do it a very restrictive way, then we might be able to prevent it as well on that side, or at least give them trouble.
Right. So, and then just go to the next. So that's the first thing: is the arguments that are that impact you, or the impacts to the community, the impacts of construction. I mean, certainly again, the additional pollution, quality of life, property values, security issues, the danger, possibility of explosions, those types of things are really the things that you should be focusing on. Mentioning the other ones, but also working with the other agencies to make sure that the people who are in charge of those things, raise those issues for you. The other thing is pictures are very valuable. If you see here, these are two charts that one pipeline and my clients used in one of the cases I dealt with. What FERC sees is what's on top. It's something, and these are the two same impacts. But what's on top, the pipeline shows it as like, it's a high up view. It looks, they almost, the picture on top almost makes this look like an industrial area. And yet it's this area with trees where they'd be cutting this huge right-of-way right through this lush forest. But when you look at it on top, it looks like a dump, So a lot of times FERC does not see, they're like, oh, 270 goes out here, or 70 goes out here, they're near a highway. So if you can take some pictures, I know that there is one picture of the site, but if you can take pictures of the community, your homes, what this area looks like, and send that in or include that, that's something that is very powerful and it is something that FERC will pay attention to, and it also makes very clear that it's not a form. And it also, like I said, I mean, FERC is looking at diagrams. They see these diagrams, they see stuff the pipeline sent in, they don't see it from the ground. I mean, I guess they came out here at one time, but other than that, the other people who work with applications
in
don't
the dark.
Oh, okay. Okay, so, yeah, so that's something that's important. And then if you just go to the slide with the emerging legal issues, I'll finish up. This is online too, if you want to go through the presentation. Okay, so these are just some of the issues I've been talking about. These are some of the legal issues that we might be able to raise, or at least at this point, start to build a case for. I mean, at this point, things are very early. I mean, that's why you really shouldn't feel pressure to put money out and hire somebody or hire me now. I mean, you just want to start to really be able to preserve these issues so that they can be raised later on. My feeling is always that it's always helpful to have somebody identify some of the legal issues, but this stage is not, completely critical. I mean, many times I get brought into cases like when there's really, it's at the tail end where nobody's intervened, FERC's made the decision, and there's, almost nothing you can do at that point. But here you're just starting out, and so just filing, getting the interventions and then starting to raise and vet these issues is what's important. Some of the emerging legal issues that I see in these cases, like I said, one of them I talked about already is the ability to access data and the due process issue. Especially in a case that's very where things are time strapped. If it takes you 20 days, which is 20 business days to get a response to FOIA, that's 20 days you don't have to respond to what the pipeline says. And so at some point you do reach a situation where there are due process considerations. There's another issue in there, this new issue too, this issue of non-jurisdictional infrastructure and NEPA review. This is something that was discussed in the EA, and this is something you see a lot. You probably saw something about 4-part tests that FERC has, and they found that a lot of the construction that's going to be associated with the compressor station is non-jurisdictional, and so they don't have to look at the impacts. That test has never been something that's been subject to judicial review. My own personal feeling is that it is counter to what the Council on Environmental Quality and NEPA regulations talk about. I mean, they set certain parameters on what you have to look at when you review a project. And they make very clear that even if something is outside of an agency's jurisdiction, even if there's an impact that an agency can't address, you still have to review it, and you still have to discuss it in the environmental impact statement. So when FERC starts narrowing the environmental impact statements or environmental assessments, and they do it in both, they do this non-jurisdictional business in both, when they start to sort of chop things up like that, I don't really think that they're carrying out their legal obligation under NEPA with this test that they've established. So that's a second issue that the potential legal issue, the property value issue, and the last one. This one comes up more, the public need, private greed. This comes up more in cases where there's an eminent domain issue. From what the application described, the company is able to acquire the land by purchase. So I don't think that there are any eminent domain issues in this particular case. But in other cases, where the pipeline is going through somebody's property, they have to actually acquire the land. And in many cases, it's ironic. You're only supposed to be able to exercise eminent domain for a public purpose. And FERC does an analysis of public purpose, and a lot of these decisions that FERC has will say something like, well, we don't know if you need the pipeline or not, but we'll assume that if the company's putting money into it, there must be a need for it. But then based on that, based on if the company's going to pay for it, then they say it's still enough public need to be able to exercise eminent domain. So I think that's very problematic, and again, that's not an issue, fortunately, in this case. I mean, because that makes these decisions even more difficult. The last issue that you can raise too, or the alternatives issue, to the extent that you can identify, and this is something you may want to work with the town on, you probably don't want to collaborate on, if you can identify a well-reasoned alternative to where this compressor station is proposed, that's going to be your best bet. That's going to be your best argument, because the cases are very clear that study of alternatives is at the heart of NEPA. That is, the type of thing you have to focus on when companies don't look at alternatives, and also when they don't look at cumulative impacts and alternatives, when they don't look at either one of those that makes their environmental impact statement most vulnerable to challenge. But FERC does look at alternatives very closely, and if you can present them with an alternative that is well-reasoned and hopefully one that does not, doesn't just take the impacts from you guys and put them off on somebody else, but come up with an alternative that is really, a win-win for everybody, they will look at that very closely, and they, will try to develop it. So that's also something to take into consideration, as you're reviewing this and filing your comments. And to the extent that you can come up, you can be in agreement on what the alternative should be, that would be your best shot, I think. So I'm happy to take questions if you have time. I have no idea what time it is. I'm still in the time change zone, so go ahead.
I have a question about the noise study. DTI did a noise study, and they've said that the compressor won't add any additional noise from what the city is already emitting, so there'll be no higher accumulated noise. Now, that's a company that DTI hired. Can we request that FERC do their own noise study?
Yes, I mean, you should definitely ask. I mean, one of the things that the environmental impact statement or the environmental assessment is supposed to be independent review. So it's something you can ask for. Typically, FERC does rely on what applicants submit, and most agencies do that. I mean, that's you saw what happened with BP and the oil spill. The agency was like relying on all their studies, and it's just people were, I don't know, blaming the oil companies, or I couldn't blame them. It's just how things have been done. Agencies have always accepted applicant studies because they're strapped for resources. So you should certainly make a plan. You should make a request. I mean, anything you can come up with is definitely worth making a proposal about or a request on. But I'm not so sure that at the end of the day that will be a winning argument. But certainly making the point that it's a biased study and should be independently analyzed or reviewed at the very least, if not having an independent study done by somebody else is a good point to make.